with that, I wanted to introduce this evening's speaker, Rodrigo Garcia, who is the CTO of Uru IT. And Rodrigo, if you want to unmute yourself and then share your slides. He's been part of an interesting survey, which is kind of the first survey of its kind of a very large number of product managers and startup folks, and looking at digital products and what the practices are in the space. As modern product folks, we always like to see data so we can tell what's reality and what's really going on. And I think this is a unique opportunity to see what's going on from a survey that was conducted or literally just finished. So this is hot off the presses. Why don't you take it away, Rodrigo?
Great, thank you, Tom. Okay, so let me know when you can see my screen. So make sure that we're all on the same page. Thank you for the thumbs up. Hi, everyone. So welcome, everyone, and thank you to the SVPMA for the invitation, for the opportunity to speak with all you guys and to present the results of this survey, as Tom well said, that we have done. My name, as was said, my name is Rodrigo Garcia. I am the Chief Strategy Officer in Uruit, and I will be joining you today on today's webinar. And I'm here to talk a little bit about the state of digital product, and more specifically, the challenges and characteristics of product development teams we are going to see in about a few slides. So first of all, let's talk about the survey that we did. Earlier this year, we launched a survey to almost 300 product team members from different companies, and from different sizes of companies, from some really big ones like Amazon, Amex, Google, and Netflix, some kind of smaller and medium sizes. When we asked about different tendencies, different contexts that they are living or they were living in or at, and the main challenges that they have to interact with or they had to affront. So let's talk just before going to the numbers. Let's talk a little bit about Urit or Urit, where we came from. So Urit is a company that creates digital products that people love. One of the things that we are going to talk in the following slides, one of the main issues that we are going to see is how we can create experiences that impacts to the different audiences and that matches with the business goals and business needs. So in EuroIT, we are focusing on that, both saying big part of the world or big part of the arena of creating digital products. On one hand, understanding what elements of the digital product creates a great experience, solves a user need, and on the other hand, how to be a digital product partner for all our companies or for all clients, right? And that translates into understand what are their main needs and translates into understand how we can add value to their businesses, right? So in that merging, just a few more elements about Urit. So by the numbers, we are in 4 different countries, or better said, in 4 different offices in the 4 different places. We are in LA, in Los Angeles, we are in Medellin, in Bogota, in Colombia, and we also are in Montevideo, which allow us to have different insights from different countries, from people from different places, and to take the best approach for each one of those learnings. We have more than 100 product enthusiasts, people from development, people from product teams, people from like designers. We have more than 150 product launch, like shooting stars, as I said there. And we also have more than 13 years of experience filling startups and industry titans. So now let's talk about the reason why you are here, why we are here. So as I said before, we have made a survey. And one of the first key results that we found out in the survey before talking about the sample size and things like that, is the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated most of the elements that were presented before the pandemic. So we were talking about digital transformations, advanced technology deployment, IT skill shortages, outsourcing, all elements that we have been hearing like for a long time ago, for several years. And now that we are seeing that because of the context of the pandemic, most of the plans that were about those points from the companies that we have surveyed needed to be like drastically updated or even done before, right? So, and the heat of that context comes to the product management team, unluckily, which had to push forward new product development and accelerate time to market to meet changing customer needs, right? So therefore, we could say like more products, more competitors in the scenario, and more outsourced needs. So let's talk about a little bit, before moving forward in the key insight that we found out with this survey, let's talk about some sample elements of how the sample size has been organized. So as I already said before, that we sent the survey to almost 300 product people, but let's do a double click there. So 60% of the people who respond work in product management, and 54% of the total of the responder are product manager itself. And being almost half of it in US, although this is a survey that has been made not in a US focus only type of approach, it's more like a global survey because there are people from different countries, from different locations, but almost half of the survey is focused on the US market. And doesn't matter that much the position of the people, but 85% of the total of the sample were part of a product team. So therefore, we can start saying that this is a really product-led or a product-focused type of insight, what we are going to see in the following minutes, because most of the data comes from people working on the product teams and product management. And regarding also to the sample and to the industries, more specifically, they were professionals from all over the industries. From technology, it's 35.5% of the sample were from technology. We have people from financial services with 12%. We have retailers with 8%, and so on. So we are talking about a sample that is like really diverse in terms of the different industries that answer the questions here, or that participate in this data finance. So now that we did a kind of double click in terms of who answered the questions, let's talk about the key findings. So what did we find? So there are three main big points to discuss, right? The first one is about outsourcing. And as I said before, outsourcing is something that we have been hearing and have been using most of the companies like for a long time. But in the last year, and now we're going to see why, but as I said there, outsourcing is no longer a dirty word, right? So if we were talking about more user needs, the necessity to deliver in a faster way, and releasing more features and to adapt faster to the changes that we are because of the pandemic, the companies that we interview, the people from the product teams that we survey, that we survey and that we ask in our surveys, they clearly need help to deliver in that way. So they need a team that helps them to develop it, to design it, and to plan what will be launched. And as the well-known Venn diagram that you all have seen, that says that you need to launch the things fast, and you have to develop it fast, and you have to develop it in the right way, and also at the same time you have to develop or create the right product. So we can say that they need help in all these three elements of the Venn diagram, right? And it's more common than ever to do outsourcing, as we were talking before. And the type of outsourcing that we have found out that it was really common is not only an outsource based on onshore, but we are talking also about doing outsource offshore, near shore, which we could consider both Mexico, Canada, if we are talking about the US market, or different countries really near to that same country, or different all over Latin America. And something that is kind of interesting, or really interesting, we could say, from the results in terms of the percentage of companies or teams that are doing outsourcing. We're talking about 57.8% of respondents indicating that their respective digital product development is supported by outsourcing. That's only in US. So we're talking about more than half of the sample helping themselves with outsourced teams, right? And as I said before, we have done this survey with people from different industries, with product team members from different industries. So this is even more interesting to consider how this factor about outsourcing is cross-industry too. So let's hear this number. So all the people that participate in the survey that belong to a retailer or an e-commerce company do outsource. All the people, 100% of the people that participate in that survey do some sort of outsource. And although it sounds like too much in terms of retail and e-commerce, you can see that the others segment or industries are not that far away. We're talking about 80% in insurance, we're talking about 75% in telecommunication. And although that we can see that there are some industries that are kind of far away from that 100% on the retail and e-commerce market, which is really high, 34% in technology, we are talking about really big march or group of part of the job done by the outsource team in a way. And also, and this is a really interesting point too, 55% of respondents employ hybrid product development, including in-house and outsourced technology teams. So we are seeing a lot of integration, or the need to do a lot of integration between teams, part of those teams being outsourced and part of those teams being in-house. What difficulties come from that? How is that integration? There are a lot of questions that could be potentially be solved, but that need to be addressed when considering to do outsource. And if we are talking about different industries, we need to talk about different business size. And different business sizes brings different results, at least in a few of the points. So retail and e-commerce, we talked about that before, right? Retailers and e-commerce companies do a lot of outsourcing, 100% of the sample. So, but what about business sizes? So small companies, and we consider small companies between 1 and 200 employees, right? So small companies do more outsource than the largest companies, which sounds kind of logic, right? Because the largest companies are the ones that supposedly have the biggest budgets and that can allocate a lot of the people to work in-house. If that is some sort of a way to bring more, I don't know, security in a way, it doesn't matter. We can discuss that later, but we can talk is that the largest companies use more in-house people, and the smaller companies do more outsourced type of job or type of product development. So if we integrate both the information on the previous slide and the information in this slide, we can easily say that retailers and e-commerce, but small sizes of retailers and e-commerce are highly interesting in doing some sort of product development based on outsourcing.
Rodrigo, I think instead of asking all the questions at the end, I'll ask some of the questions or everyone else during to help with the flow of the slides too, to where we're actually located right now. And so one of the questions I have when it comes to outsourcing, you can have it two ways. You can have one team that's intermingled that has outsourced and as well as employees of the company. Do you know what a breakdown is of having that scenario versus having outsourced, but a very distinct group that's outsourced where they all may be contracts, just external people? How have you seen that structured?
No, we don't have that kind of breakdown in our sample, or at least in our analysis. I'm not 100% sure who was Alok. It was the
Yes.
question? Yeah,
Yeah.
high level. I'm not 100% sure of how different that is in terms of the industries and in terms of the business sizes in the propensity of doing outsource. That could be an interesting point. I'm not 100% sure either, and that brings me some the internal debate in terms of how different it could be from the organization of that people having, you know, those two scenarios, having people outside and inside the company. We don't have that breakdown, unfortunately, but we can discuss that later. Maybe what all the rest of the guys think.
Yeah, anecdotal evidence, because a federation of, separation also for security reasons, that type of thing. So yeah,
Exactly.
and yeah, exactly. Tom just brought that up. Great. Sorry. So let's
No.
yeah.
We are all in family, we could say, so feel free to interrupt me in any time, no problem with that. Okay, great. So why it's all those things? A little bit we have already said that why this outsourcing rise was because when we talk about the pandemic, but let's do a double click of the four main key reasons why this is an outsourcing upstick right now. So first of all, this is the talent shortage. So product development continues to evolve, right? So every day there's a new, every day between quotes, right? But every day there's new technology and there is no enough people. We are going to talk a little bit about why there's not enough people, but the shortage translates into 40, and this is a really big number, 40 million unfilled jobs in 2020 that maybe you may think, or I used to think that maybe that type of unfilled tendency could get lower in the following years, but the tendency is all around. There is an assumption that by 2030, the shortage is predicted to reach 85.2 million workers. So we are talking about an increase of the demand of digital product, an increase of the demand of digital development, design, and product managers, and all those kind data analysts and all those kind of profiles, even more than now, and therefore a shortage, and which will rise even more the outsource most probably. So secondly, people are asking more for more digital products, mostly because of the pandemic. There is a lot, and we talked a little bit about that, but one of the things that the COVID-19 pandemic brought us is the digitalization of a lot of habits or actions that we used to do outside of our houses, and that we had to accept to do it inside, that we had to accept to do it in a digital way. So as I said before, right, there are more expectations from our users, more need from our users, more delivery expected, and more product development needed. So companies needed to adapt to that new context. People needed to do their things on digital products, and there is product development work that needs to be done and therefore needs to be outsourced. The third point is that never has been harder to find talent, which is crazy, at least from my point of view. People are more comfortable now, mostly also because of the pandemic, to change a job that were before. Helped by the pandemic and the changes in the habits, and therefore it has become a great challenge not only to find the right people, but also to retain them. So we have been seeing rises in attrition on companies, not only in product development companies, but in vendors, in services providers and things like that, on consultings. So that type of attrition affects directly on the needs to outsource, affect directly on the difficulties to reach and to find the right people, the right talent to your company. And finally, but not least important and heavily connected to all those three previous points, remote work has seen a rapid acceleration, which translates into having people working for all over the planet. No need to have working on the same location that the company is. Again, we can discuss a lot about what's happening from a cultural standpoint with that distance, with that and different time zones and different habits or work habits. But the truth is that not having to work directly in the same place and the same location that the company is right now opens a lot of opportunities, at least from the companies to do outsource and to reduce the amount of time discussing if we should do or not do outsource, but to try it. And therefore, to increase the outsourcing. Any questions so far? We are okay? Yeah,
It's interesting.
great. Okay, so that's the first point. The second point is about, we could talk about machine learning, but it would be better to talk about high-end technology or the using of latest technology. So machine learning adoption on the digital product development. So we have found a great adoption of advanced technologies that used to be not that much time ago wasn't considered, or was something like more of a small tendency, and now are becoming a real high tendency. So 70% of the people that answered the survey are implementing some sort of a high-tech, advanced technology, machine learning type of approach. And with people that are currently implementing right now, or people that are planning to implementing really soon. So we are seeing a bigger adoption to all these type of technology, more specific machine learning, but we can talk about different type of technology and implementing, right? AI, data-informed approach, and things like that. And as we talked before, retail and e-commerce are 100% on board with the newest technology, right? So we can do some sort of a parallelism between what we have seen before. The insurance industry in this case, and the retailer and e-commerce industry also appears here as the main industries that are open to embrace this kind of approaches. And in a lesser percentage of industries, we can find industries such as telecommunications or healthcare. But I think that the key part here is not how big the insurance is right now and how small is healthcare, but the other way around, how we can see a rise in all the different industries. Although that rise is, or that reason is focused on the insurance or retail e-commerce industries, we are seeing an increase of using this type of technology. Now, how we can implement that new technology in today's processes, right? So the answer is having the right framework, which has been the answer all since the beginning of the time, right? So continuous discovery and delivery are by far the most common framework being used, followed by the use of design sprints or agile sprints and customer development. As we are going to see in the following slides, this is quite connected to the need of the growth as one of the main pillars or columns or the finance. So a framework which allows you to validate really quick and allows you to test different options really quick with real users and to move forward after getting information, after getting data, and after validating those ideas, are well embraced and are well used to move forward after it. And that's for the point number 2 of the 3 points that we have found out. And the third one, let's go to the third key insight. So data and talent being the reason why the product managers don't sleep at night, right? So data and talent are 2 of the main points to ensure product growth and to make sure that the idea is aligned with the business needs and market, which is, we have been talking about this from the first slide almost. So that's why there are challenges such as building high performance team, or that you need to have create a high quality deliver, or getting data like feedbacks and user validations, and after it or based on it, define the right product strategy that takes into consideration user needs and pains, or basing it on analyzing metrics and making decisions based on data, as we said before. All those points which are part of the funnel of the creation of a product or for products or for digital products and validating with real data, with real users are key elements of the growth of a product itself and the different features that you will release of the product. And you kind of move forward, and this is like the biggest conclusion, you kind of move forward in the right direction without the data and without the right talent. And as we said before, having the right talent is harder than ever right now. So we are like in an egg versus chicken kind of paradox, right? So where are we going first? So as we said, ensuring company growth is based on all the points that we mentioned before, right? Which will allow companies to get goals such as the creation of new innovative products, or getting great usability for product, or getting user acquisition. Oh, this is kind of interesting because you can debate and you can discuss inside, or like in internal, you can discuss it internally, which point is more important in a growth of a product, if it is in the create an innovative product, or if it's having the great usability of product, or having a great user acquisition. But at the end of the day, it's all those points together. And you kind of see that in how even is that distribution of the sample, right? So it's what we said before. We are talking about having the right team there, having the right usability, having accomplished or matching with the user needs, and matching with the business need too. And that need of doing some really fast delivery to solve the user needs and to gain a quick time to market, we can see that too on how the different companies are doing the budget allocation. We are seeing 54.3% of the companies doing or launching new MVPs or MMPs. We are seeing 42% doing budget allocation on new feature for existing products. So we are talking about faster releases. We're talking about more releases. And therefore, you can suspect it, we are talking about the need of having new talent, or more talent, which are difficult to get. So we are coming back and forward to the same point, right? Because everything is kind of connected at the end of the day. So as a conclusion, and this is almost the end of the presentation, or this is the end of the presentation, we can do like 3 major key insights, right? So number 1 is the ability to innovate is critical to survival, which is something that we all know, but it's something that gets increased in the context of the pandemic. But to innovate, you need the right talent with the right skill. So is that the reason why companies turn to outsource to fill those gaps, especially in the context of smaller businesses? So the second point is that the outsourcing, right? So we talk about it a lot, and it's more necessary than ever, as we said before, especially considering the growth goals and the product development needs from businesses, focusing on getting new customers and retaining the existing businesses. And finally, the last point is the importance of having the right talent as a competitive advantage. So you can imagine, if getting the right talent is harder than ever and the attrition is higher than we used to have, having the right talent is not only a really nice technique in terms of delivery a great product, but it starts to become a competitive advantage. And you will see a lot of type of competence between companies, especially between software providers, for those talents being difficult to get, right? So basically, that's why we are looking for that's why basically companies are looking for the right people, both in-house and outsource. And at the end of the day, it ends up being a deal of how we can find those people being outsourced, if there's no solution, or being in-house too, or how we can create those or assemble those hybrid type of teams, right?
Rodrigo, there's a really quick question. Just on 2 slides back, you had MVP for minimum viable product. Some of the folks are less familiar with MMP. If you wanted to.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. So we are talking about minimum marketable product. So we can differentiate the two of them by what we are considered as the main element that that product should have. So when we're talking about the minimal valuable product, we are talking about the user needs. We are talking about what are your capabilities in terms of technical abilities. What are the tools that you have in your hand to create that product? But when we are talking about the minimal marketable product, we are focusing 100% on the market fit and the status on and the context of the market that we are going to release that product. So there is a lot of focus on what are the competitors in that market, where is the value, and how to differentiate your product for the rest of the competitors. So there's a different approach, although that we could say that we are considered almost the same variables, but it's a small kind of difference that brings the difference between the two approaches, right? Make sense, Tom?
So you've got one that's, if I summarize correctly, you've got minimum viable product of it does its job, and minimum marketable product is we can sell this thing.
Exactly. Great summary. Great summary, Tom. Totally.
Very good. So if folks have some other questions, there were a few things going back in the chat window. One of the things I would be curious about on this mapping of the ratio of new products to enhancing old products, I would be curious how that varies by how old the company is. So obviously, if it's a new startup, they have no old product.
Exactly.
But if you're a company that's been around for say 7 years or more, whether you wind up spending more time on, you get more time dealing with technical debt and less time getting new products out. I'd be curious what that ratio looks like as the company ages.
It's not part of the survey, that ratio, so I wouldn't try to put a number there. What I could tell you is exactly what you say, Tom, is that if the younger, if you could say the newest companies tend to focus on the launching of newest product, but if you could say older companies, I don't know if that's the right term, but the older, there's a lot of tendency not only of improving the product that you already have, but on launching new products to attack to different user needs. And even in some cases, there is some kind of cannibalization to a product just to test how the result will be in launching those different scenarios, and to see if there is more benefit in improve the product that you used to have, or even it could be cheaper, if it makes sense, to launch a new product all by itself. So
Yeah.
there are lots of factors in the same scenario, right?
We see that with certain companies where they say, well, this is the next generation of product.
Right.
And it's a serious challenge from the positioning standpoint of, okay, now we have an electric car we're selling alongside our gas car. They're very different, and the features of one are not present in the other, but we have to carefully tap dance until the new technology catches up with the old, and then eventually, and there are some companies that have played that game, as I'm thinking of in the wireless space, as we've had generations of wireless radio hardware, each 2G, 3G, it keeps marching on. But yeah, that's quite interesting. Eric had an interesting question. Eric was asking if he'd be curious to hear about how the budget split differs as companies go through different stages, how the split is between kind of engineering development versus marketing. So on the one side, you have all of your coders and your folks that are actually like building things, and then the marketing side, you've got kind of your growth hacking and how do we get this to market, and what's involved on that end of the equation, and where that balance shifts over time.
Yeah, that happened a lot. Historically, the folks, and that's kind of hard to say to me because I come from a marketing background. So historically, the folks for marketing doesn't get that much part of the budgets in comparison with the technology part of the team. But what we have seen, and the focus that we have seen in the latest year, and that I could take the approach of saying that we will see even more in the following years, and the focus on the growth and the focus on the testing and the focus on the launching and trying to validate as soon as possible if that product makes sense or not in the market, had produced a kind of a differentiation of how that budget has been distributed. And we have seen an increasing, or at least I have seen an increasing in the budget for the marketing teams.
I think also it's been fascinating some of the, if you look at the way startups are organized as opposed to companies that have been around for decades, marketing, if it's leveraged properly, is involved early on with the design process in validating and getting test users, as opposed to historically engineering driven tech companies where they build it first and we'll hire marketing and sales once we're done building this, and then there's no chance to pivot or adjust when they get it in front of customers and discover, well, actually it needed to be adjusted in terms of features. And
one comment about that, Tom, is that, and you are exactly correct. I mean, what we are seeing right now is that there are like the liquid merge of different areas. And we are used to, in the previous 20 years, something like that, we are used to see different areas, all with different goals, all with different OKRs or different metrics that they were pointing to, with different budgets, and like having almost no communication at the end of the day. And now we are seeing, because there are tendencies like the lean validation that allows you to use in the product development, on the product design, allows you to use tools that are part of the toolkit of different areas. For example, using social ads or ad campaigns to validate the idea of a product, which is the task of the UX team, supposedly. So we are seeing that merging of different areas, that merging of different budgets, and that makes sense if you think a little bit about it, because the OKRs are the company's OKRs. You have, then if you start like digging, you will see KRs that are proper for each one of the areas, but the OKRs is the company.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, I think Alok, did you have a question to ask as well? I saw your hand up earlier.
I've got several questions I've been thinking about. So this is great. Now I want to tie this also back to the development side, the product management side, because one thing I've found in Silicon Valley is it's almost like the developer a lot of times becomes a product manager. Product managers are not always developers. And there seems to be a little bit of pecking order, at least out here. One thing I was wondering is if one actually has to pick up skills from coding perspective, what are the current dominating, I should say, programming languages to know now? And has that shifted in the last, let's say, 5 years? Were they different ones? Because I'll give you an example, Ruby on Rails was really hot at one time. I don't hear about it anymore.
No, now. And if you go to a backend team and say that you're preparing all the backend in Ruby on Rails, you get some really tough, angry people right behind you. Yeah, that's totally correct. And it changes all the time. It depends a lot of what are the area that we are talking about. So in the front end, we are seeing an increasing of the different frameworks from JavaScript. So React Native is all over the place right now, React and React Native. And we have tons of projects, and we are seeing tons of projects that tends to go directly to React. Backend is more like really distributed in a way, because we are seeing projects in Java, we are seeing projects using Python, and we also have some projects in Ruby on Rails yet. So we have seen people for all different type of projects. But Python is a really interesting tendency right now, because all the possibilities in terms of using it for the data analytics or data science type of project. And we are seeing an increase of that type of project too. So they are appearing all the type of framework related to Python, like, Panda and all those things. And we are going to start seeing, I suppose, or I guess that we're going to start seeing even more projects related to R, like the language R, or Go, or things like that, right?
Very good. I see Jim has a question. He has your hand up. And if anybody else has a question, throw your name in the chat window, because I can't see everybody on the meeting all at on one screen. But go ahead, Jim. Why don't you unmute?
Thanks, Rodrigo, for sharing the data. A lot of interesting stuff here. You said that a lot of companies are feeling forced into outsourcing. I'm wondering how many of those are actually hiring on these people as remote resources versus doing it through a contract sort of arrangement, because there's a lot of challenges in managing a contract situation, and the incentives aren't necessarily aligned with what the company is trying to accomplish. In other words, the contract company gets paid by the hour, so taking longer to do something is not a problem for them, but it can be a big problem for the company who's trying to hire them to get something done.
You are totally correct. And there is also one major point if you want to contract something, because we are not talking about only on outsource onshore, right? We are talking about offshore. So there's a lot of things regarding to taxes and things like that from different countries, especially in Latin America. So that's really tough. We can see an increase of outsourcing based on partners, companies that take the roles of partners as UAT, but maybe we are starting to see, and we have seen increasing in the last year of contract to specific individuals taking a role, but that is a really gray area, especially because of the taxes, as I said before.
Yeah, it's really challenging, especially communication. So perhaps in a future survey, you could also ask, hey, so you are outsourcing. How's that working out for you? How well is that working compared to using your in-house resources? Something like that.
Totally.
Thanks.
Totally.
That's good. Thanks, Jim. That was an interesting question. Yeah, I think getting that touch point of how's the product feedback of is this working for you or not, or what did you give up as a trade-off for this, and getting a handle on that can be rather interesting. I think Teresa had a question as well around the survey.
Yes, I just wondered if you all happen to do any kind of open-ended questions where people could just write in their commentary, and if you did that, if you could share just any of the interesting little tidbits that came out of that. You may not have, but I wondered if you did, if you could share.
You give me like the step to tell that we are going to be releasing an ebook with more information about the result of this survey and point like that. So that will have more information related to the survey that I will have to process to answer in more detail that question right now.
I can answer if you want, Rodrigo.
Oh,
That way, we didn't added open questions. We wanted to do it. It was our first survey, so we wanted to do it very simple and for people to participate. And we know that open questions more of the times sometimes leave people behind because they don't want to spend time thinking or that kind of thing. So we simplified the survey for this time. We want to do this survey every year. So we are really appreciating all your feedback and questions. I'm taking notes to add a lot of new points of view for next year. And certainly we will try to add some open questions because they are important for the point of view and perspective of all of this.
Yeah, I think to that note, if people have, as they've seen the data as it's presented, if they've come up with questions of their own, say, oh, you should have asked this. Like, yeah, this is a great time. One of the advantages of actually having the folks that designed the survey on the call is you can look at it and say, you know what would be a great question to ask, and feel free to float that out there, and then
yes, please.
Yeah, then next year you'll get to see the data on the question that you had there. I think Alok had another question as well.
Yeah, Greg, there's actually a question from Greg Walker, and it's a good one. It's seeing trouble integrating the outsourced team with in-house teams, and there's always a fear about taking jobs away. And any research how successful companies have been integrating the outsourcing in-house to be working as one, and some of you may have more experience have been developers and for a longer time. We really saw that first inflection point after the .com implosion of outsourcing, and actually then crazy hours too. You don't know when to go to bed and wake up. It's critical, but hence nearshoring. The time zones are a little better. And actually it's now moved to other departments too. It's no longer engineering like it once was, or development. But if you could answer that question, which is awesome, a really good question. But I'm wondering also, any of you on here, have you seen inflection points? I'm sure even before the 2001 implosion, outsourcing was going on even before, but people didn't highlight it the same way. So I'd love to know anyone's thoughts on that, as far as all these inflection points in the industry when it comes to outsourcing nearshoring, offshoring, nearshoring.
So, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'll let you go first and I'll chime in, as you'll probably say most of the same thing.
No, regarding to the first half of the question from Alok, so I think that the main challenge there in the integration from people from outsource with the teams in-house are, to me at least, is the cultural differences or the cultural gaps that they could be. It's even harder that that points could be even more difficult in some cases, that things related to the knowledge or the general knowledge that they could be taking our jobs, right? So luckily, there are some strong similarities in terms of cultural between US and Latin America, which creates a really nice kind of integration, a really nice kind of communications flows between the companies and the companies that do the outsourcing. So that hasn't been such a problem, but definitely that's a major point that it's really strong worked during the whole project of the process of being outsourced. And for the second part, Tom, I don't know if you want to.
I was just saying, having run a number of global teams, there's definitely some cultural navigation around management styles and languages and preferred means of communication.
Exactly.
Some of the countries, you don't raise your hand and ask a question in a group. So that sort of thing is something that has to be consciously managed and worked through. But on the flip side, I think if it's clear, you almost have the baseball or the soccer methodology of like clear who has the ball, so that it just drop in between and then both sides are looking, oh, I thought you had it. I think that's the biggest thing of having kind of a clear definition of who's doing what. But I found from a design perspective, if you are launching a product in the global market and you only have people from just one background and one culture, you miss out on opportunities of, oh, we had no idea, but this product which we optimized for our region, now that we're trying to launch it in another part of the world and we have to get the languages changed and the rest, that this isn't going to work at all, because if we had somebody with a different alphabet, non-Western alphabet, or somebody with a different framework or mindset going in, that they would have told us, hey, wait a minute, are you sure you want to put this here, because it's going to be in the way. If and the globalization insight and being able to appeal to a global audience is really helpful to have. So there's some pluses that go with having that, at least if you're launching a product globally.
And Teresa's raising her hand.
Yeah, I'm curious, from those of you from the whole group, certainly from our speaker, but also from everybody else. I just recently heard from a client. I was talking to a senior executive there, and they were saying that increasingly companies are finding that when they use offshore resources, particularly in time zones that are quite opposite of, let's say, just to pick a country, US time zones, that they get the B team because the A team won't work the graveyard shift. And that's actually driving an interest in nearshore outsourcing. And I was curious as to whether any of you who work with offshore resources and offshore teams, or outsourced offshore teams, outsourced, because internally it may be a different story, whether you've experienced or observed that or heard this.
That's an interesting take. I had almost the opposite in dealing with an operations standpoint. dealing in cybersecurity, one of the problems we had was the opposite, that since it's 24/7 and you're trying to get coverage, it was a much happier experience to hire folks to work in the European time zone and then the Asian time zone that was the A team during their prime time.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. The A team, that if you need people to be available to you during your business hours, let's take the US just
That
for,
was, yeah,
you
and
need
that,
available during our business hours, you're getting the graveyard shift in the other countries, like say India or the Philippines or what have you. And so the scuttlebutt is that, the best people at those companies won't work those hours. They get the better hours. So that's what I'm curious about, whether you
the hardest hit group, I believe, running a global team was typically the managers, and the work-life balance, if not kept in check, went out the window when I was working with a team in India, which was 12 hours different, and then a team in the Middle East, it was 10 plus hours different, and then talking to Asia on one side, like that whole back and forth was, although the employees were able to stick to their own time zones, the managers were the ones that got stretched both directions. Yeah, I'd like to hear from other folks.
Ryan,
if
you
they
gave
have-
a thumbs up. What was your thumbs up in reaction to? Maybe we can take the slide
Sure.
down.
I think I resonated with that comment, given that this quarter in particular, my entire dev team is in India. So we'd had some kind of reshifting. So that's definitely something that I've noticed, that I've been at a small startup and now I'm at a large e-commerce company. And so working with offshore teams in both situations, the work-life balance was tough. At the startup, it was helpful that when the team that was in India gathered basically a product counterpart, that was helpful, because when you have these teams that are segmented by 12 hours, it can be it can be really tough to have sync ups in your mornings and evenings and repeating that process 3 or 4 times a week. So I think that's something that helped at the previous startup, because I think with execution across a 12.5 hour time difference, there's always going to be questions, and by having a counterpart, I think that you reduce that extra amount of waiting time to unblock certain teams, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely, I can relate to that for sure. Anyone else have any feedback on working the globe from a time zone perspective?
Eric Wang had his hand up.
Yeah, Eric.
So I worked with an international team startup a couple of years ago, and what I discovered is that I want to rely on the A team offshore to work in their normal hours, but having a 2-hour window open each day so that we can have some discussions that are needed. And in order to do that, we need to be flexible on the US side as well. But that's the price we pay for having an offshore team. And I think ideally we don't want that time frame to be completely overlap, but having at least a couple hour window helps. And being developers, their forms of communications generally preferable if they try to do written communication anyway, and they would like to spend most of their time in the day coding. So I think if the team coordinates well overseas, that's actually preferable to have the window 20% overlap instead of complete overlap. The other thing I noticed, and I'm really curious about the survey points too, is for my current company, there's actually an indication that COVID can negatively impact the practice for outsourcing, where the price points for those resources can be drastically higher because of the less boundaries for big techs to get access to them. And I wanted to see if any of the team members here have any recommendations on how to counter that, other than paying more.
Yeah, if anybody wanted to comment on from the early the 20 to 80% overlap, at least with developers. I have some US-based developers that said if they could block out 80% of their hours to say no meetings during this time, they would be overjoyed to claim they were in some other time zone and then have a good excuse to not have other folks try and schedule meetings that they have to sit through. Rodrigo, did you have any feedback on the tax question?
Yeah, that's exactly like that. I mean, on one hand, luckily in EuroAT we are mostly in all America and Latin America, so the differences in time zones is not that hard, and so we haven't had that kind of issue. But reducing the amount of meetings and points like that and windows like that is a major goal. But I could say about the points about having the A team or the B team working on the project, to me, it's not that, or based on my experience, it's not that centralized in the time zone factor, but in the partnership factor. So how involved am I making, or how big am I making part of the project to the people who is developing it, or the people who is creating that product? So where the developed team have the opportunity to embrace the project, to feel that they are creating the product by themselves, and they are being part of the creation, or they're making a decision, or they're helping to the product creation, product development, that's where even the B or C team becomes the A team, because they take ownership of the project.
Good point.
I think
we have time for one more question. Let's see, did anybody else have, I'm kind of scrolling up and down here frantically through the chat window. Anybody wants to raise their hand? I see Mela has her hand up. But Mela, you're on mute. Sorry.
I put this in chat. We had Boris Glantz in 2019 speak to us about offshore, managing your offshore team. And it's in the chat here. And the video of his talk is there. Let's see. And also, you might want to check out Turnkeylabscom. They're an offshore product development firm for innovative product development. And those two resources, just as resources, are highly respected to make this work as best as possible. Okay, I see a comment from Jim. So check out the video from 2019, Boris Glantz.
So good plug for the archives. We've got, like I say, it's a good proof that over 20 years we've covered nearly every topic at one point or another with some interesting insight. And you can see sometimes how things have evolved over time. You know, this was the snapshot from 2019 versus here we are in 2021. And you can see a lot of similarities. You may see a few differences here and there as well. With that, we're coming up on the top of the hour.
I'd like to add just one last question.
Oh, yes, please.
And it'll be a great way to actually end the talk with our newest sponsors. Is really to explain, okay, I'm sold on nearshoring. But let's go one step up. It's a two-part question. Everyone probably on this call knows what the Accentures of the world, the E&Ys, they have integrators and developers, obviously. How should one look at without naming companies specifically, I call it the GSIs, or the industry calls them. How should one approach looking at these different players? Are they different tiers? And then how does one go about using a nearshore vendor? So starting with the whole kind of ecosystem landscape of all the developers out there, how they're structured, all the way down to, okay, nearshore, then what do I do if I want to choose a nearshore? Maybe some criteria that someone should look at.
Things to think about.
Yeah, to me, the main points, and I think kind of already said that, but the main point is that there has to be some sort of a integration in terms of cultural and the key values of the companies that are working together. Because most of the issues, as we said before, most of the issues or potential issue that could happen when you are integrating different teams with different culture, with different ways of doing things, are based on that. So when you're looking at a company, you're not looking just only to a dev team or a design team. You're looking at a partner. You're looking to someone who is willing to adapt his time frame, who is willing to adapt his goals, who is willing to understand exactly what you need in terms of business and exactly what your user needs in terms of user needs, basically. So the cultural factor and the values of the companies are, to me, one of the main factors, if not the biggest one. So understand why are they doing what they're doing, where are their focus, where are the value proposition of that agency? Is in the technical quality, is in their commitment with the product that they are developing. So that's where it's the key part of a partnership.
Yeah, one of the projects I'm working on right now, they have a choice between going with a very big player like a GSI caliber, and one of the comments was, you don't always get the A. We were talking about A teams. You do not get the A teams. You'll get maybe freshers who are appointed at still the very high bill rate. Whereas if you have more boutique, you will tend to get a more across the board and quality for this less price. So that's kind of one of the criteria that I've noticed in my own world as far as why someone would choose even a niche player, smaller player, as opposed to a very big one. But it sounds like it's a lot of cultural and even change management issues that go, and it's not just about, there's plenty of great developers out there, right? And developers might be more a dime a dozen when you are nearshoring, as opposed to the values of that organization.
Totally.
Sounds like a good summary of the cultural fit, the value fit, and actual partnership, as opposed to throwing things over the wall. This is kind of the big three takeaways I got from that answer. So with that, I would like to thank this evening's speaker and Urit for sponsoring this meeting and SVPMA as a whole, and look forward to further dialogue. If you want to reach out to anyone, feel free to let me know. We do have their contact information in our sponsor section of the svpma.org website. So you can reach out if you've got questions that, you go to sleep tonight and wake up in the middle of the night with a brilliant question that you didn't get a chance to ask. Feel free, we can put you in touch. And with that, we look forward to just a quick reminder to register for the workshop that's coming up on stakeholder management in next month's meeting. We look forward to seeing you talking about with Netflix about how they manage conflict and how they use that to polish their product. With that, I wish you all a good evening and look forward to seeing you at a meeting soon. And thank you very much to everyone who attended, and especially to our speaker this evening.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you soon.